All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Community Conversations. We will give folks just a second to pop in here. Ethan got this all set up for me, so I think he got it set up right, maybe a little bit late, so it might take folks a few minutes to come on if you didn't know this was happening. But as you come in, feel free to say hello and to let us know where you're watching from. And I'm super excited to be here tonight with folks for Community Conversations, where we're going to talk about all things OCD, and for folks who have been navigating kind of holidays and, stepping forward, all sorts of different things. So again, as folks come in, would love to have you say hello in the chat and let us know where you're watching from. Before we jump in, I always want to note that this live stream is educational and is not intended to replace therapy. For treatment-related questions, you can work with your provider or contact a local clinician. And you can also use IOCDF's online resource directory at iocdf.org/find help to locate a trained clinician near you. And I'm going to go ahead and drop that link right here because it is one of my all-time favorites. If folks have not checked that out, it is such a great place to find providers. So I hope y'all do. Also want to note that the International OCD Foundation is not a crisis hotline. If you're ever in crisis or if you're feeling suicidal or unsafe, please call the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline by dialing 988. You can also access online at www.988lifeline.org. Go to your local emergency room or call 911. We really want to create a safe space for everyone tonight, whether you knew this stream was happening or not. As I watch folks start to pop in and the views start to go up, we want to create a safe space for you wherever you are in the world right now. And as a part of that, we really want to be kind and respectful to everyone as we engage, because at the end of the day, we're here to support one another. So want to remind folks that this is being broadcast on several social media platforms and it's being recorded. So please keep that in mind as you comment and as you connect with and as you support one another. And I see Howdy from Oregon. Love that. As folks come in, please feel free to drop in the chat and let us know where you're watching from. Don't have too many folks commenting yet. Would like to get that rolling. Again, I think Ethan just got this set up like 20 minutes ago. So I don't know that folks knew this was happening, but as folks come in, feel free to say hello and let us know where you're watching from. So tonight, this is a part of the typical Community Conversations live stream. And Ethan and I are going to kind of be alternating doing these in the new year. But we'll kind of talk about that when January rolls around. Tonight, this is just kind of a live conversation about all things OCD. And I have some things I want to talk about, but as folks are watching, you are more than welcome to absolutely share kind of where you are and ask any questions, share what it is that you want to talk about. But I want to talk a little bit about, one, holiday blues and kind of this challenging period I think that so many of us with OCD face over the holidays. And two, I want to talk about heading into the new year, because I think there tends to be a lot of pressure for everybody, but especially for those of us with OCD as we enter this new year. We've been talking about this in Stick with the Ick a lot recently. We had a whole kind of conversation on this in a support group earlier this week, where it can be really hard to see things all over social media that say new year, new you, right? And there can be this pressure to get it right or to set this brilliant New Year's resolution, right? Or to change something about yourself in the new year, when the reality is you are amazing and awesome exactly as you are. And I think there's some opportunities here to think, what does it mean not to do new year, new me, but new year, same me, more authentic version of me, leaning into treatment and recovery and everything that's meaningful. So again, as folks come in, feel free to say hi and where you're watching from. And I want to ask folks first, before we get into kind of the new year side, what has your holidays been like with OCD? How have the holidays with OCD been for you? What does that look like? What's been maybe beautiful? What's been challenging? What's been coming up for folks over the holidays? So I will talk a little bit about what that looks like for me, and I'm going to be super authentic and try to do that in the same way that Ethan often does. But the holidays with OCD can be really tough. And I think even in recovery, I will say for me, there is a lot of pressure as I head into this time of year because I want to look like I have it all together with family that maybe I don't always spend time with. There's this pressure to look like I'm doing okay and look like everything's all right, which of course, if folks can relate to that, would love to hear from y'all about that. I think there's also I don't know, at least for me, this piece when routine shifts or when routine changes. I'm so used to kind of the go, go, go in the work piece. But when the routine changes over the holidays, OCD sometimes gets really, really loud. And that, especially for me, tends to come up with downtime or with things that I'm really looking forward to. Time that I've been really looking forward to spending with Ethan. OCD tends to get loud in those moments where I've been really looking forward to just hanging out and not working. I think there's also specific things for me, and maybe for so many of us, again, would love to hear from y'all, that come up around themes over the holidays, whether that is around cooking and contamination. That can be a very real thing. It could also be, that could be contamination related to going to someone's house and eating someone else's food. That might be contamination related to you cooking and being, fearful of, gosh, contaminating or harming someone else. I know these things have come up for us in our household. This also might be related to harm when you might be around family members that you're not typically around that you care about, or holding kitchen appliances when you are preparing for meals. There also might be aspects of religious and moral scrupulosity over the holidays around particular religious practices or services, or feeling like you have to look like you have it all together in a certain way. That can come up too. Feeling like we need to make family and those around us feel a certain way. So I will give an example for me. I still don't see anyone commenting. I'm going to make sure, because usually we have a lot of comments, that this is actually working on the platform. So if anybody wants to comment on any of the platforms and let me know that things are working, that would be awesome. But in the meantime, I am going to just check over here and make sure that they're working, so y'all can watch me do that. Oh, nope, just people aren't commenting. Okay. I guess I'm not Ethan, y'all. I tell you what, I see people watching, but not commenting. So I so appreciate if people want to throw in some comments and let me know how your holidays have been and what that has looked like for folks with OCD. Would so appreciate that. So I will tell a little bit of a story for me, and I'll go ahead and get authentic since we're not having a whole lot of comments yet, but where OCD came up for me hardcore over the holidays. And this might seem like such small things, and they were such unexpected things, but I think they're things that folks can probably relate to. So woke up on Christmas morning. Y'all know I'm a minister, had already had beautiful aspects of worship and things like that. Live in a beautiful interfaith household where I'm a minister, and y'all know my partner Ethan is Jewish, so we got to celebrate both Christmas and Hanukkah, but we celebrate kind of all of those things together. And woke up and I think had put a lot of pressure from an OCD perspective on, I don't know, having a good day on Christmas, like having the right kind of day. And we had kind of scheduled some Zoom times to talk with our families, and particularly to talk with my parents. And yeah, I see Sarah saying I can definitely relate to contamination fears ramping up, especially with flu, RSV virus season already being so bad. Yeah, I have heard that from so many folks. That is such a big thing. And I think that's I will say, even around worship and things like that for us, that's been really tough of trying to navigate, well, what's OCD versus what is actually me, staying safe in the midst of there being flus and viruses outside. And what does that look like? But so for me, over the holidays, Ethan and I were really excited because it was the first time we had some downtime in a while, and we actually got to put together our house a little bit. And this was kind of a big deal. Some of y'all know we moved like last July, but we still haven't hung a whole lot of pictures on the walls. It's our house is kind of still just not decorated because we work and advocate and do lots of different things. And we finally got to carve out time right before the holidays to do that. And we woke up on Christmas morning with all these Zooms with our families, and we were so excited to show them where we put some of the pictures in the house. Now, this is going to sound like such a minor thing, but this is one of the places I think moral scrut can come up with families. But we showed my family one of the pictures that we put on the walls. And I see Darren, hi from UK, norovirus over Christmas really spiked my OCD. Absolutely. And I'm curious, Darren, if you tell us, was that fear of getting the norovirus, or was that you getting it and it ramping up your OCD because you were sick? So I think both are absolutely valid. I'm just curious. But one of the first things that happened when we got on a Zoom with my mom and we're kind of showing her the pictures around the house, is she told me that she didn't like where we put one of them. And there was something that was a wedding present for us, and we thought we put it in a really nice place. She wasn't a huge fan of where we put it and kind of made that known, and said that she was a little frustrated with me that we didn't put it where she would like to have put it. Now, this might seem just like such a small family thing, right? Families disagree about stuff. Family might say, I don't like where you put something in your house. OCD, for some reason, it wouldn't normally, but latched onto that and completely twisted it around for me on Christmas. And again, I kind of chalk that up to some of the things I was talking about before, where not as much is going on. I'm kind of out of routine. There is a lot of pressure to have this day be awesome and all sorts of stuff. But I ended up spending so much time the rest of the day trying to prove to myself that I was a good person because I put the picture in a place that my mom didn't like. I was having these obsessions around, what if I'm bad? What if my family hates me? What if this actually means I'm awful? What if this means that I'm really hurtful? What if because I put it in this particular place, that means something bad is going to happen? All of that kind of stuff. And I think it was that some of the compulsions that came up were, I would say, physically planning how to potentially move this picture that I didn't necessarily want to move. Thinking through all of these past times that to prove that I was a good person, quote unquote, through rumination, checking with those around me. And you can imagine this took so much time on Christmas, like so much unnecessary time. And again, it's something that probably in other parts of the year, I would have been like, oh, my mom didn't like where we put this picture, right? But yeah, it's your house, Katie. Yes, Phil is right. And I think at other times of the year, I would have been like, okay, my mom doesn't like where I put the picture. That's okay. But I think there is something about the holidays where these little things can just get stuck, right? Where it can really, so for me, my core fear is, what if I'm a bad person, right? And so I think when we have these core fears, it's easier for things to kind of get stuck around them over the holidays. That can be really tricky. But thank you, Phyllis, for saying that. And it's totally fine, but it was just interesting looking at how much something like that for me got stuck. And I'm curious if there's other things for y'all that were particularly sticky over the holidays that maybe wouldn't be sticky at other points during the year. Now, Darren, you said getting it really ramped up. I think that can be such a huge thing when we're sick, right? And I think our defenses are down. We're doing something that's a little bit different. We might not, I think when we're not sick, sometimes we have all of the energy in the world to use our treatment skills and tools and to really dive into exposures and kind of response prevention. But when we're sick and we're already exhausted, it's like, man, where do we find the energy for that? That can be really, really hard. So thanks for sharing that. So I want to talk about the New Year piece a little bit. And I know I shared at the start that we talked about this in some Stick with the Ick support groups this week. And I'm curious what folks kind of think about this. I wonder if anybody here, and I'll actually drop this into the chat. When people talk about like a fresh start for the new year. What part of you feels resistant or tired, or kind of what does that bring up for y'all? And I'll go ahead and say, when you hear people talk about the new year resolutions, what comes up for you? I'll go ahead and drop that in the chat too. Okay. And I say, oh, people are starting to really chime in. Okay, wonderful. Vicki, my OCD peaks during important times, my son's recent college graduation, and then Christmas opening gifts, worrying if they were clean. I washed my hands after opening some gifts, wanting everything to be perfect. Yeah, Vicki, I so relate to this. And I think you're naming, yes, of course, Christmas with opening gifts, but also the recent graduation. And I think sometimes we focus so much on the fact that, OCD might get heightened during really challenging times, but it can also get heightened during really, really beautiful times where we feel like there's so much pressure to enjoy or to be present or to take it all in, like a graduation, or for me, like my wedding in 2023. That was such a big one. Yeah, so this is a great example. It's super hard for me to navigate contamination because I worry about getting sick, spreading sickness at church, and also about missing church if I don't go. Lots of themes. Yeah, so we can see here, how OCD can take, again, kind of like I was saying before, something that we might be able to navigate at other parts of the year and make it really big over the holidays. So I think in particular, I'll kind of say with this, I think over the holidays, there's this pressure of I absolutely can't get sick because I can't ruin the holidays. And there's going to be so many people at church or at family gatherings or at the synagogue. So what if I spread this? There's kind of this moral scrupulosity piece. And then there's also this religious scrupulosity piece. Like, what if I get sick and I'm not able to engage in the religious rituals or services that are so significant to me? There's a lot of themes here, Red Balloon. Like there are a lot of layers here with this, and just absolutely, absolutely valid. So I want to shift a little bit into this new year piece, and I want to hear from folks. When you hear people talk about the new year and resolutions, what comes up for you? Is that something that feels helpful? Is that something that feels hopeful? Or is that something that feels, I don't know, that feels icky? I'm curious because I think there's some different thoughts on this. And yeah, as folks are learning that we have a live stream tonight, I'm so glad, Zach, to see you. Thank you for Katie O'Goat. I love that. So psyched you're here too, Zach. Thank you. And Phyllis, I worry about getting the older people at church sick too. Then I remember I am one of the older people. Phyllis, it's so interesting because my grandmother, actually, we just had this conversation. She lives in a kind of continuing care retirement community and space for older adults. And she was sick recently and was so nervous about getting everybody around her sick. And I was like, Grandma, you get to worry about you too. But I think so many of us with OCD or who have OCD in our families, we're so worried about making sure everybody else is okay. Oh, and Vicki's agreeing with what we were talking about. You're right. At my son's graduation, I didn't want to be, I wanted to be in the moment. So I didn't take pictures and tried to focus, yet I still felt like I missed it. Yeah. So Vicki, I think OCD, we can focus so hard on making sure that we're quote unquote leaning into our values that sometimes we end up kind of missing stuff. And I think OCD can really twist things in different ways. And that's really, really challenging. And yeah, you want to be in the moment so badly. I'll say the same at my wedding. I kept thinking, I want to be in the moment. I want to be in the moment. I want to be in the moment. And I think I focused so hard on wanting to be in the moment that I somehow possibly missed part of being in the moment because I was focusing too hard on what it meant to be in the moment. It's like, oh, CD can really get you there. Okay, so I have some people starting to answer what, when you hear people talk about New Year and resolutions, what comes up for you? Okay, Red Balloon. Not a fan of resolutions. I usually already have multiple things I fixate on, so there's not a lot of room to take something else to obsess on. I feel I feel that in my core, red balloon, because I think there's already, you know, we're heading into the new year, and it's like, man, there's already stuff I'm trying to figure out and worried about. Do I really need to like have one specific thing that I put on this pedestal? Yeah, absolutely. Chris, I hate when people say new year, new me. I'd much rather them say new year, more authentic, genuine version of me. Yes. Yeah, this is such a big thing. And I agree with this so much of, I think that it never should be about becoming somebody else. Oh my goodness. It should be, how do I lean into this year as the most authentic, awesome, you know, version of myself, using my skills and tools, or giving myself permission to be me, and, you know, all of those different things. Yeah, Zach, ditto to Chris, but my resolution is finishing Dr. Grayson's workbook. Also fair, also a good resolution. Yeah. Chris, I totally was the first person. Yeah, I'll give you credit. That's all right. So I really agree with what folks are saying here. And I am going to go ahead and throw out there that I think New Year's resolutions for folks with OCD, and I won't say always because I don't like to speak in absolutes, but I think a lot of times they can be compulsive. And I think actually they can be compulsive for exactly what Sarah just said here. There feels like a lot of pressure to have major shifts when New Year's Day is just another day. And somebody shared that in a support group this week as well, that it's like, it's just a shift of a number, right? But we put all of this pressure on when it shifts, like we have to do something big. And that's where I think we get into kind of some compulsion sometimes with OCD, because we put so much pressure on that. And sometimes we might even start to obsess about the fact that, I don't know, there might even be a magical thinking component of, it means something that this new year is changing. That means that this is my one opportunity to make a change, and I need to make it big, and I need to do it right now. So I will be honest and say that this was a big piece in my OCD journey. And when I was really struggling, and I should have actually gotten this out for this live stream because I knew I was going to talk about this, but when I was really, really struggling and kind of at probably at my lowest, it was, it was 2019 heading into 2020, which is not all that long ago. And I actually, you know, through the end of 2019, told myself that I was going to give myself permission to do compulsions until it hit 2020. And when 2020 hit, I was going to stop doing all compulsions. And I set kind of I made this big proclamation, and I actually wrote it out in kind of this manifesto that was like 20 pages that I shared with my family of, these are all of the things that I've been doing up until this point, and my resolution in this new year is to never do a compulsion ever again, and I'm going to flip this switch. I'm curious as folks hear that. Yeah, good thing nothing stressful happened in 2020. Yeah, red balloon. Yeah, solid, 10,000%. But I'm curious if folks relate to that. Yeah, Zach, if I had a dime for all my OCD manifestos. Yes. So yeah, I think a lot of us have made a lot of OCD proclamations at different points throughout the journey. But mine, I'm curious if anybody can guess, how well do you think that worked out for me at the beginning of 2020? How long do you think I made it when I was like, I'm never doing a compulsion ever again for the rest of my life? I'm curious what folks think about that. And how that went, that I was like, hey, I'm just going to do whatever I want until the new year turns over. And then it's going to be different. What do y'all think? Well, folks may be typing. If you are not typing, I will go ahead. 5 seconds. Yeah. Yeah, Chris, that's about what it was. And it's one of the reasons I'm not a big fan of New Year's resolutions, and I am not a huge fan of proclamations. I think they can very much kind of become this compulsive and not often helpful thing. My therapist did use my people-pleasing drive as a positive motivator to finally stop a deeply entrenched compulsion. All right. Yeah, sometimes we can twist that a little bit. Yeah, difficult. Yeah, 24. I don't even know that I made it 24 hours, Darren. Yeah. Failing at wildly unrealistic plans makes me crash even harder and be more discouraged. Yeah. So that's exactly what happened for me. I had this whole big, beautiful essay that I literally made my family sit and listen to me read as the new year turned over, where I proclaimed that I would never do a compulsion again for the rest of my life. And there was this, as Zach just said, wildly unrealistic plan that I had about this. And it did actually make me crash harder, because then when I did ultimately get a little sticky and do a compulsion, I was like, well, it's all over. I have messed up this entire year. 2020 is done. I've ruined all of it. And I actually, at one point at the beginning, thought that because I broke my proclamation, that was why COVID happened. So if that is the case, I am sorry, y'all, for ruining 2020 for everyone. But that's what my OCD told me happened. But it's really interesting. And it's actually, some of y'all might have heard me talk about compassionate commitments. I talk about these a lot in support groups. The idea of compassionate commitment. Yeah, I did. Zach, it was me. The COVID was me. I'm so sorry. All because I didn't follow through with my New Year's resolution. Oh, ruined everyone's lives over here. No, but really, it's really what the idea of compassionate commitments came out of for me. And now how I think of these are compassionate intentions that we're planning to set, but that we're not going to either check off and move on from, or that we're not going to be really angry with ourselves if we don't do perfectly. Because I think that's what often happens with resolutions or with goals. We kind of set these big, yeah, I need to, yes, y'all, I'm cracking up. I need to let everybody know. It was actually me, COVID, my fault. Sorry, my bad. But yeah, I mean, so I really like this idea of compassionate commitments where we get to set an intention and be nice to ourselves. If we, don't do it perfectly, if we, as long as we're trying and kind of leaning into it. And that's something that I really do now every week. It's something I do in all the groups that I lead, where we set compassionate commitments as opposed to resolutions or big jumbo goals or anything like that. And I really love that. And I love, as we approach the new year, thinking about what does it maybe mean to set a compassionate commitment rather than a resolution? Because I think it is okay to reach for something and to strive for something and to want to recover. I think if I could look back at my 2019 to 2020 self, the revision that I would make from big proclamation to compassionate commitment that might have been more helpful would be something like, okay, I know OCD has been really, really hard for me, and I am compassionately committing in the new year to really working on my exposures and to trying to do response prevention as much as I can, and to sitting with some of that discomfort, and to giving myself permission to maybe get it wrong sometimes. I think if I had said that first time that I quote unquote messed up, it would have felt a little more okay, and I would have had space to kind of continue to step forward as opposed to crash and burn. So I think that can be a really beautiful thing. And I think in general, with kind of all of this, I love the idea of being compassionate without being satisfied. What that means, how I kind of react when I do a compulsion is I tell myself, like, wow, okay, of course you did that. You have OCD. OCD sucks. It's really hard. This comes up sometimes. But I care enough about myself that I want to do something different moving forward. I want to hold myself accountable to maybe not do that compulsion next time, and to work really hard to lean into something different. That's kind of what I see with compassionate without being satisfied. It's not saying, okay, cool, I can do a compulsion whenever I want. It's also not saying I'm horrible for doing compulsions. There's this aspect of finding gray. And it's the same thing that I think about with kind of compassionate commitments as we head into the new year. So I'm curious for others as we're kind of talking about this. As you look at the new year, what does it look like for you to show up authentically as you? Not as, let's see. I'm going to drop this in the chat and then I'll read what folks are saying. What does authenticity look like for you right now, even if it feels messy or uncertain? And I'm thinking about that in terms of leaning into kind of new year, most authentic version of you, as opposed to new year, new you, or new year, you with, I don't know, big proclamation, something a little, yeah, we are totally not just good at ERP around here. Yeah, absolutely. Super obvious. Red Balloon, I want to hear more about this, because I think I understand what you're saying, but I want to understand a little bit more. I hate when I have super obvious manifestations of having OCD, even though I know I do. Doesn't make any sense, but I feel that way anyway. So are you thinking of feeling frustrated when kind of classic forms of OCD come up, and so I'll give an example. For me, the thing that frustrates me the most is when I get stuck on checking the stove or the door. So many years into recovery, and occasionally I'll just kind of get stuck in a loop with it, and I get so mad at myself because I'm like, man, this is like vanilla OCD. Oh, I know this is OCD. Why am I stuck on this? And I get so frustrated. So I wonder if that's kind of what you're talking about, or if not, I would love to hear a little bit more about what you're talking about. Yeah. So let's see. So again, curious, what does authenticity look like for you right now, even if it feels messy or uncertain? Yeah. What do y'all think? Compassionately unsatisfied. Yeah, I love that, Chris. That's awesome. Love this. Yeah. Zach, saying, I don't know. Yeah. I feel like that is such an authentic, messy, uncertain thing. And just saying, I don't know, I think is so powerful. And that can be a really beautiful non-engagement response too. But being okay with the not knowing. Whether it's about what our OCD is saying or just what's going to happen tomorrow or next year. That's a really messy, uncertain, authentic thing to do. Yeah. Aspirations as opposed to achievements. I like that it's not a success or failure dichotomy that way. Yeah, love that. Victoria, yeah. So it's oh, I love what everybody's saying. So Victoria, is OCD a neurological issue? So there are lots of different thoughts about where OCD comes from and why folks have OCD and exactly what that looks like. And there are tons of studies right now on exactly what's happening in the brain with OCD. So there are some things absolutely going on in the brain that are neurological. But in terms of where OCD actually comes from, there's a little bit of a split here between the idea that we are born with OCD or predisposed to have OCD, or that, OCD emerges because of things that we experience in our life. I tend to be somebody who's in the camp that believes that we're predisposed to have OCD, where I believe that, I was born with this predisposition. My brain was kind of set up for OCD. But then I experienced certain things in my life that kind of turn that switch on, or turn that switch on in particular ways. I think those experiences that we have kind of dictate the way that OCD shows up, or the way that OCD kind of pops out. I work primarily with religious scrupulosity. I have OCD personally, but on the professional side, I work a lot with religious scrupulosity. So I see a lot of people who are navigating religious and moral obsessions. And with that, I see a lot of people that I think were very much predisposed to have OCD, but then also sometimes grew up in either religious spaces that were really meaningful to them, or maybe really challenging sometimes too, or expressed a lot of rigidity. And OCD kind of merges with that, and all these different themes develop around the things that are the most significant to us. I think the really, really neat thing about recognizing it as a neurological issue, as something that we're predisposed to have, or as a mental health issue, is recognizing that, one, it's not our fault. You are not doing anything wrong. It is literally something that is misfiring in our brains. And I think there's a really beautiful recognition that even in the midst of that, OCD is one of the most treatable conditions. OCD with evidence-based treatments like exposure and response prevention, along with others that the IOCDF just did some great work putting out kind of a whole new treatment guide this year, is actually incredibly treatable. And there's Ethan and I talk a lot about the reality that there are so many individuals like Ethan, for instance, who was really, really severe with OCD, and that they say physically rewired his brain to be able to function in a different way because of treatment. So I think there are all of these different layers, and I probably gave you way more than you were asking for. And there are lots of thoughts on this, but I want to always kind of bring it back to the hope piece too. Let's see. Oh, I love all of this. Yeah, let's see. I'd like to make decisions large and small based on something other than guilt, shame, or OCD. I don't really even know how. Phyllis, oh, I love this. Okay, so I want to dive into this one a little bit. I want to talk about this because I think this is something big. OCD wants to make our life's decisions for us. I really believe that. Oh, and Katie Ann, I said, where can I find the new treatment guide that you speak of? Yeah, absolutely. And then we'll dive into Phyllis's piece. I am going to pull it up right here so that you can, and I will drop it in all of our chats here so that folks can see this, because it really is awesome. Okay, so I just dropped it. It should show up in all of the chats, and it is just iocdf.org/OCD-treatment-guide. But it's really fantastic. So yeah, Katie Ann or anybody else, please check that out. Okay, so looping back here to Phyllis' question, I would like to make decisions large and small based on something other than guilt, shame, or OCD. So I want to talk about this guilt and shame piece in particular, because this is one that I think is huge. I have a presentation that I'm doing in February on guilt and OCD, and I was finishing the slide deck for it actually today. So this is like right here on my mind. And I think often with OCD, we talk about discomfort in the form of anxiety. But anxiety is not the only form of discomfort that comes up with OCD. There is also fear, and there's disgust, there's guilt, there's shame, there's so many others. And I would actually argue that guilt and shame is one of the guilt and shame are some of the more challenging components that come up with OCD. And we see this a lot with scrupulosity, but also in any form. And I want to differentiate guilt and shame here for just a second. The worst ever Inside Out movie. Oh, are we talking about if guilt and shame were the only ones in Inside Out? I don't know. Okay. Anyway, guilt is, okay, I've done something wrong. I've made a mistake. The whole idea of having guilt is so that we can recognize and, make changes as we step forward. And shame, on the other hand, is, Katie, you're going to have to bring on some experts on guilt and shame. Just really don't think you have enough lived insight on that. Yeah, Zach, I will say, my guilt and shame are the things that I have pretty much lived no, ironically, I'm actually not talking about it from a lived experience perspective. I'm talking about it more from kind of a research perspective. But Zach, this is one thing I will say, I think to the core. I know inside and out from a personal perspective. That's super funny. I love that. Anyway, okay, let me go back to, but yeah, so guilt is I've done something wrong, and shame is, oh, this means I am bad. And I think that's a really important differentiation. And with OCD, we often jump really quickly from guilt of I've made a mistake, I've done something wrong, to shame. That means something about me. I am a bad person. So for many people with OCD, me included, our core fears show up in the form of, what if I'm bad? What if I'm a bad person? And anything that kind of comes up in terms of obsessions and things like that, we equate to, well, this must be proof that I'm bad. Those feelings of guilt, and even more so often those feelings of shame, which is kind of this deeper, this means something about me, I think are some of the most intense things that folks with OCD experience. And the reason is it makes us question who we are to our core. It makes us question everything about ourselves. I'll say for me, I've been through so many phases of life where it felt like I physically couldn't step forward, or I wasn't allowed to get better, because what would that mean about me if I didn't resolve being a good person or not being a good person? And I think, Phyllis, this is why it can be so hard to make decisions, because we kind of get stuck in this place of, well, I couldn't deal with the guilt or the shame if I made the wrong decision, or if I did something bad, or if this meant something about me. And the irony is, OCD actually keeps us stuck. It moves us away from every single thing we care about. It's actually not getting us any closer to, I don't know, to our values or to our family, or being the person that we want to be. But I don't know, it feels like we have to listen to OCD when we make decisions in order to be good. Now, our joke in our house, because I always say, I'm really nervous about that, I feel really guilty, Ethan always goes, well, great. You feel guilty all the time anyway, so you might as well do the hard things. You're going to feel guilty about it no matter what. Okay, I'm going to scroll down a little bit. Yeah, Brene Brown is an amazing guilt and shame queen, and I actually was citing some Brene Brown today, so 10,000%. Yeah, so I think, I'm wondering for y'all what it looks like if we take a step back from just the guilt and shame piece. What does it look like as we step into the new year to say, new year, same authentic, or even more authentic, awesome version as you? But what if we looked at what it means to set some compassionate commitments for OCD not dictating our decisions in the new year, not dictating the choices that we make? So, I'll talk about what this means for me, but I'd love for some folks to put into the chat what this looks like. Yeah, real event, false memory, OCD on guilt, shame, and fear. Yeah, Darren. So that's a huge piece actually for me. I spent a large chunk of my life thinking I was responsible for crimes that I didn't commit, with false memory OCD, and confessing to things that weren't my fault. And, it's I'm laughing at all the guilt and shame stuff, y'all. I love y'all. But confessing to things that weren't necessarily my fault and being stuck in this massive kind of shame cycle. And I think with that, I often felt like, well, I'm not allowed to get better, or it's bad if I let myself get better or experience joy or meaning or life, because what would it mean if I was no longer experiencing this guilt or shame? It must mean that this thing is true, or it must mean that, I don't know, that I'm a bad person because I'm not, feeling these emotions around it anymore. Hi, Stacey. So good to see you. And yes, did I have OCD? Yes, I do have OCD. I have lived experience with OCD. I see Zach sticking to commitments I made to my therapist. Yeah. The queen of guilt and shame. I study shame. What do you do? Yeah. I love all of these, especially around the softer things like self-compassion. Zach, I think you're saying you want to stick to commitments that you make to your therapist around those things. And it's so interesting, because I think we often think of those quote unquote, those softer things like the bubble baths, right? Or the lighting candles. And I'll say, I talk to my therapist about this all the time. Self-compassion is the freaking hardest thing that we have to do. And have to do is probably the wrong word. Sorry to my therapist. But it's so challenging. Ethan always says for him, it's like trying to learn Japanese backwards. And he doesn't know Japanese, just to classify. But it's not a softer thing. It is a freaking hard thing because of what Sarah just said here. My brain convinces me that maybe I deserve to feel bad. Yeah. And I see Zach's like, yes. Yeah. This is such a real thing, y'all. I think for so many of us, and I'll go ahead and name a whole bunch of themes here because this can come up with any theme. This might relate to, as we named, false memory. This might relate to real event. This might relate to POCD or harm OCD or contamination or moral scrupulosity or religious scrupulosity. What else am I not naming? Perfectionism OCD, just right OCD. But think about, OCD, as we know, comes in so many different gross artificial flavors and can show up, with all of them all kind of swirled together. And with all of them, so often, our brain convinces us that maybe I deserve to feel bad. Maybe I don't deserve to get better. You know what? Maybe because I had that thought, or maybe because I could have potentially done that thing, or maybe because this thing could be my fault, or maybe because this person could be in danger. Maybe I deserve to feel bad. Y'all, this right here is what kept me stuck for such a long time. It's what kept me stuck for such a long time, because I would start to feel a little bit better and I would be like, no, I don't freaking deserve this. Man, I found out way down the line in treatment that I was in many ways intentionally keeping myself stuck. I was intentionally doing compulsions without fully knowing that that's what I was doing because I was scared to get better. I was scared, what does this actually mean about me? I felt like, well, I don't deserve it because I have these thoughts or because I may or may not be this horrible, horrific, awful person, right? I deserve to feel bad. And there's kind of this, I don't know, this kind of pious compulsive thing about feeling bad, right? Where we get to kind of, I think our OCD says, well, at least you're feeling bad about it. That must mean that you're a little bit okay because you feel bad about it. But if you let yourself not feel bad, if you let yourself feel good, what does that mean about you as a person? Man, so real. And it's so interesting because I see this from Sarah and I'm like, I want to reach through the screen and be like, Sarah, you don't deserve to feel bad. But it's so hard for me to say that in my own life. And I'm not trying to give you reassurance, by the way, but I do think it's so interesting that we can see that for other people, but not often for ourselves. Yeah, I love what Red Balloon just said from a spiritual perspective, remembering not to make decisions when you're in a place of desolation, when you can recognize it's OCD. I feel like it's similar, not trustworthy place to make decisions. Yeah, I always like to tell folks if it looks like OCD and smells like OCD, it's probably OCD. And if you're in a space where it feels like you need to make this decision right now, in this very moment, where it feels urgent, where there is fear and guilt and shame and anxiety, and I need to do this and I need to do it right now. Such a great opportunity to not make that decision, to maybe recognize that this looks and smells like OCD and that we can maybe address this or make a decision when it no longer feels urgent. I think that is so insightful. I see lots of broccoli talk. I don't really know what's going on, but I'm glad people like broccoli. It's always hard to keep up with the chat while I'm talking. Y'all can see me. I'm not as good as Ethan with this. Y'all can see me get distracted and then I see things and I'm like, broccoli, and I lose my train of thought. That's totally fine. We are our hardest critics, even right now, as I talk about getting distracted by broccoli. We are absolutely our hardest critics. Do you fully recover from OCD, or am I fully recovered from OCD? Well, I can answer both of those questions. So, recovery from OCD is absolutely possible. And my messaging around this has changed a lot. Liz Mackingvale has really inspired me in this. She's a good friend and I work with her on scrupulosity at OCDI Texas too. And she has really been talking for like this last year about the way that her messaging on this has changed, how she used to really say, OCD is chronic. And I said that for a really long time too. And I think the way that, I'll speak for me, the way that I used to say it sounded very much like, well, there isn't hope, or you're going to navigate this thing forever. And I think the shift for me is I still believe that, yes, OCD is chronic. There isn't technically a cure for OCD. But I do believe that the treatments are so effective. And going back to even what we talked about earlier with the brain and treatment, I think that it's possible to get to a space where you no longer meet the diagnostic criteria for OCD. There's a lot of neuroplasticity in our brains, y'all. And by engaging in treatment, we can really make some shifts and we can really make some changes. And yeah, might not be a cure, but you can be in a space where OCD is no longer in the driver's seat. And you might hear it kind of in the back of the bus a little bit, but it's no longer up in the driver's seat driving the car. That's you. And that's really where I feel I am with OCD. It does not drive the car of my life anymore. When I get onto things like this, I'll talk about, where OCD still pops up for me, but it's such a small fraction of life compared to what it used to be. And I think Ethan would say the same. We definitely have seasons. And I think that's the same with anything that's chronic, where things are going to pop up. But I really believe that knowing that I have OCD and knowing that it's chronic and that I can use my skills and tools is what helps me to stay in a space of recovery where it's not really dictating my life anymore. John Hirschfield wrote a really great article a number of years ago called "The Cure to OCD is Knowing There Is No Cure." And it was this idea that every day we wake up and we are able to recognize, oh, this is how my brain works. And these are the patterns and the ways that things kind of fit together. And we can respond based on that. And that actually helps us, not have OCD in the driver's seat, not because there's quote unquote a cure, but because we know the skills and tools to use. And those skills and tools can almost become automatic. So I hope that answers the question. Okay, still broccoli. I don't exactly know what's going on with broccoli, but I'm glad I'm glad there's broccoli going on in the chat here. Kevin, I wonder when I'm going to be able to lean into my guilt and shame and not pray. I feel like a fake when I show up here and act like my ERP is okay. It's not always okay. Well, first of all, I want you to know you are not a fake. And I'm so glad that you are showing up here and sharing just authentically where you are. And I want you to know you are so not alone in that. I talk about scrupulosity literally all day, every day. And it's so hard when you're feeling that intense guilt and shame to not pray compulsively or not ritually wash compulsively or not confess compulsively, whatever that is. And I want you to know you're not a fake. It's really just this hard. And I will say, for me, and this might sound, I hope this is encouraging and not discouraging for folks, but this might sound really graphic. When I was first getting better from OCD, and I was serving in school chaplaincy at the time, and I was still teaching through treatment and officiating services and doing all that kind of stuff. I was doing kind of treatment in secret at night. And when I really fully got back into my role, I really committed to doing my best to not engage in compulsions during the day with my students, because I had gotten far too good at doing compulsions all day, every day, that people had no idea, even when I was preaching. And it felt so intense. The guilt and shame felt so intense when I was teaching class to not do compulsions that I used to, sorry, emetophobia folks, but I used to physically run to the bathroom between classes and actually get sick, actually throw up, because it felt so intense for me. And it didn't, stay like that for a really long time, and eventually shifted. But I think that's the intensity. People don't realize that guilt and shame can feel that intense that it can make you physically feel sick. So I want you to know, again, you're not a fake. This is freaking hard. You are literally being asked to, let a bear stand in front of your face and not run away. That's what it is to say, hey, I'm not going to pray compulsively right now. And I think, if we're thinking about kind of tangible stuff with ERP, it might not be starting with not compulsively praying. It might be starting by doing it a little bit less. Working with your therapist to develop a hierarchy can be such a huge thing. So we don't have to jump to the biggest, hardest exposure. A lot of it's about kind of starting with that response prevention and doing little e, big RP. I've made decisions based on OCD since I was 4 years old. I truly don't know other ways to be. Phyllis, I think it's beautiful that you're even just recognizing that. I really, really do. And I think I want you to know you're not alone. I think so many of us have felt that and have been in that for such a long time. And what I want to tell you as we head into this year is not in a New Year's resolution way, because we've already talked about the way that we feel about that, but in a compassionate commitment way. I would love for you to think about, what are a few things that you could do this year where you get to lean into new year, most authentic version of Phyllis, not most authentic version of Phyllis's OCD. What are some decisions that you maybe want to make for you and not for your OCD? And even with this community conversations live stream, I would love, as we get into the new year, because again, it'll be either me or Ethan or both every week. You can even come on and share that and share, what is something that you're leaning into? What's maybe a decision that you're leaning into, not based on OCD, but based on you. And we would love to, offer accountability, but also lift you up in that and just celebrate where you are with that, because that's really what this community is all about. And we want you to know you're not alone in doing that. Yeah, Phyllis, I think a lot of us have that experience. Ethan talks about this a lot. We talked about this a lot over the holidays, where sometimes we miss some of those developmental stages with OCD. And I want you to know that that does not mean that you can't make some of those decisions for you this year, despite what OCD says. I think sometimes OCD uses that, where OCD says, well, this happened, or you missed this stage, or now you can't make this. And I want you to know you can and you deserve to do things for you, as hard as it might feel. Yeah, seeing things for everybody but yourself. Absolutely. Yeah, Caitlin, I think OCD runs my family, but I'm also realizing much of my shame and fear around decisions and how things work out is due a lot of criticism from my parents and later on partners like them. Caitlin, I relate to this. And it's so, I had a question a little while ago on if I, still have OCD and all kinds of stuff. So I am not actively in OCD treatment and haven't been for a long time. But I'm a really big advocate, actually, that anybody who's working with people professionally as a chaplain or as a therapist, like other folks on here, that we really should be seeing therapists ourselves and working through our own stuff, because we've all got stuff. And the stuff I'm working through right now is actually exactly what you said. It's some family stuff and some past relationship stuff, and without getting too personal, it's realizing that there are some things that I've heard from people in my life that have sounded a lot like my OCD. And sometimes with religious trauma, I'll talk about this as the double whammy, where we might be predisposed to have OCD, and then we hear really scary things from the pulpit, and it all kind of collides. I think this can happen with criticism from family or from partners or from friends, where it almost sounds like the things that they're saying are identical to what our OCD is saying. And it can just get so intertwined. A lot of my shame in particular and guilt relates to messaging that I've heard kind of throughout my life. So I relate to that. And I want you to know, I think it's still, with treatment, is so possible to pick apart. And for me, it's coming kind of after OCD treatment, where I'm starting to recognize, oh, wait, that's why some of this stuff was so sticky. And, it didn't change what I did with ERP, but it is helping me to kind of understand in a different way now, like, oh, that's why, I don't know, those voices seemed so intense. So I just want you to know you are not alone in that at all, Caitlin. Okay. Love the conversation. Ooh, I know we're at 8:00. It's so funny because folks didn't come on at the very beginning, because I know it wasn't advertised, and now we have all this conversation. I'm like, it's 8:00. I know I need to go in a second because we have a trivia night and stick with the ick. But I want to get through at least the questions. Example of non-engagement compared to avoiding thoughts. Yeah. So non-engagement is when you are making the choice, when a thought pops, or so non-engagement is obviously making the choice to not engage with OCD. But when I'm thinking about a non-engagement response, I'm thinking of something that we are intentionally saying to turn our back on OCD or to shut it down. Now, a lot of times we can be really confused about, well, how is this different, like you said, from avoiding thoughts? And when we avoid thoughts, I like to think of that as pushing them away, actively pushing them away, where non-engagement is allowing them to be there, but not doing anything with them. It's actually being totally cool with them, like following you around, but not continuing to have the conversation. So example, if I get an intrusive thought right now that I am going to, oh gosh, I was trying to think of a good random harm one, but all that came to mind was Ethan. So I'll say, okay, so say I get an intrusive thought right now that I'm going to go down and stab Ethan after this live stream. Sorry, y'all. Very OCD-esque. Option one of avoiding might be, oh gosh, okay, nope, not going to think about that thought. I need to stop thinking about it. Okay, nope, I'm going to distract myself over here. And that actually gives it a lot more energy, right? Non-engagement would either be me being like, cool, okay, there's that thought. I'm going to keep going with this live stream and let it kind of hang out here. Or it might even be saying something like, yeah, maybe not, who knows? Those non-engagement responses are us responding to it, but not continuing to engage. Avoiding would be saying, hey, I need to get rid of this. I need to push this away. That's compulsive. And that's just as compulsive, honestly, as me sitting here thinking of all the reasons that I'm not going to go down and stab Ethan after this. Both of those things are compulsive and both kind of reinforce that cycle. But non-engagement is actually, even with our bodies, even if you're not saying anything, emphasizing that you're cool with the thought being there and that you can continue to move forward. I think our body language is really different with avoiding versus non-engagement. So avoiding is often we're really tense and we're kind of crunched over and we're trying to kind of run from it and get rid of it. Non-engagement is like, cool, whatever, shoulders back, I'm here in this moment with confidence. So I hope that answers that a little bit. I think even just the approach makes a really big difference. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Doing the ERP imperfectly and having compassion for yourself is massively an exposure in and of itself. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I see lots of good support. I'm going to see if there's any more questions. Yeah, absolutely. Totally possible. And that's if you check out the IOCDF treatment guide, they talk specifically about the combination of medication for OCD and exposure and response prevention. And I always say medication. I always like to classify that I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a medical provider, so I will not make recommendations on medication. But medication can be so helpful alongside treatments like ERP. And I, for a lot of reasons, as a minister in Georgia and then also as an athlete, didn't want to take medication. And I always thought it was cool for everybody else but me. And when I was told that I really needed to as a part of my treatment, I had a really tough time with that. And I actually had a pharmacist shame me here in Georgia for taking an SSRI when I started them. And I am so freaking glad I did. Because I think what it did for me is create a little additional space between stimulus and response. We know that for Viktor Frankl, I don't know why I said his name wrong. Viktor Frankl tells us that between stimulus and response, we have a space to choose. And I think for us, it's really between obsession and compulsion. We have a space to choose whether or not we do that compulsion. But with OCD, sometimes it feels like there's no space there. It feels automatic. Well, the SSRIs or the medication prescribed for your OCD sometimes creates a little additional space. And that space is where we actually get to use our treatment skills and tools. So I think both are really important because I think for me, without that space, I couldn't have used my skills and tools. But with that space, if I didn't have skills and tools to use, I also wouldn't have known what to do with it. But my therapist at the time framed it to me as, hey, you've been working so hard on developing these skills and tools in treatment. You are so deserving of a little extra space to actually use them. And that was life-changing and just game-changing for me. Okay, still lots of broccoli talk. I still have no idea what's going on with the broccoli, but I feel like I'm getting to the end. Okay, roast. Y'all, I have no idea what's happening with the broccoli. It is so hard to read these as we're doing a live stream. So I am going to sit with the uncertainty around all of the broccoli talk. When do you do these live? Just happen to find it. Yeah. So this one we weren't great with advertising for. We're going to be better about that in the new year. But IOCDF has live streams pretty much every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern, and then Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern. And those are typically kind of expert-based live streams. The 7 p.m. are more community-based live streams. These are going to now be every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, and it's either going to be me or Ethan or both of us, and sometimes we'll be on with different advocates in the community. So literally catch me or my partner here every Tuesday, 7 p.m. Eastern, and would love to have y'all. And yeah, so as we finish up, I'm so glad folks ended up joining me at the beginning. I was like, oh, there are no comments. I'm gonna have to talk to myself for an hour. So thank y'all for plugging in and joining. As we close out, I do want to always note that the IOCDF is a donor-supported nonprofit organization. Please consider making a donation at iocdf.org/donate, because that supports these awesome kind of programs that we have for y'all. And we are really excited to kind of go into the new year and to have these streams every Tuesday with me or Ethan. And I hope that y'all have a just beautiful, beautiful rest of this, I guess, short rest of this 2025 and move into 2026. And I hope that everybody is gentle with themselves as they move into that. And for anybody who's looking for something fun to do right after this, we have a free game night in Stick with the Ick that actually starts in 7 minutes. And I see a number of folks here that I think are going to be popping over to that. So we're going to do a little OCD community game night. All are welcome for that too. But as always, just glad to be here with everybody tonight. And I'll close out by saying, as we head into this new year, I hope that it is not a new year, new you, because you are totally awesome just the way that you are. But I hope that you lean into this new year as the most authentic version of you possible. And I hope that with everything we talked about tonight, with guilt and shame and beyond, you give yourself permission to make choices for you and not your OCD this year. That you give yourself permission to maybe even experience a little bit of joy, because you are so worthy of that. So thanks, y'all. Bye, everybody.